The sand snake wound swiftly along the shifting desert, its constant undulations keeping the heat of the ground from burning it underneath. Hunting had been poor today, but with the sun rising higher, the time had come, like it or not, for the snake to temporarily seek shelter. When the sun had descended some, it could come out again, this time hopefully to snag a mouse or beetle. One could not go long in the desert without food, where hunting had always been a difficult business. Pushing itself hard, the snake traveled up the latest dune, aware that the only minutes separated it from shade. Once over this one impediment, it would be home free. The sand beneath the snake suddenly erupted. Mandibles more than a foot in length snapped tight around the midsection of the serpent. The snake flailed desperately, trying to slither out. A monstrous head burst through the sand, followed by the first pair of needle-like legs. Still struggling, the snake struck at its attacker, hissing and trying to use its venom. The fangs, however, could not penetrate the chitinous exoskeleton of the huge arthropod. One leg pinned down the rear half of the snake, the beetle head of the massive predator twisted sharply at the same time, the mandibles squeezing tight. Flailing, the bloody front half of the serpent dropped to the ground, head still hissing. The black and red arthropod emerged completely from its hiding place, turning now to the process of dragging its meal to where it could eat in leisure. With its front appendages, the nearly 7-foot long predator began prodding the back half of the serpent. A shadow suddenly loomed over the hideous creature. Immediately it turned its bulky head and spat at the new intruder. The corrosive poison splattered against the somewhat ragged silk of the bearded and rather wild-eyed elderly man. From above a long, almost beak-like nose, he gazed down briefly at the sizzling mess, then waved one gnarled hand over it. As he did this, the acidic poison and the damage it had already caused completely vanished. Watery blue eyes focused on the savage insect. Plumes of smoke arose from the exoskeleton. The beetle-like creature let out a high-pitched squeal, its spindly legs teetering. It tried to flee, but its body seemed no longer to work. The legs buckled and the body crumpled. Parts of the monstrous insect began to drip away, as if the creature was no longer made of shell and flesh, but rather runny wax now melting in the hot sun. The squealing arthropod collapsed in a molten heap. The mandibles, so deadly to the snake, dissolved into a pool of black liquid that readily sank into the sand. The cries of the dying creature finally cut off, and as the ragged figure watched, what remained of the once savage predator utterly vanished, draining away like a few drops of rain that annually sought to soothe this parched land. Sand maggot. Too many of them out here now. So much evil about everywhere. The white-haired patriarch muttered to himself. So much evil even out here. I must be careful. Must be very, very careful. He walked past the savage snake and its just as unfortunate pursuer, heading to another dune just a short distance away. As the bearded hermit neared, the dune suddenly swelled, growing higher and higher, finally forming a doorway within that seemed to lead directly into the underworld itself. Watery blue eyes turned to survey the oppressive landscape. A momentary shiver ran through the elderly man. So much evil. I must definitely be careful. He descended into the dune. The sand immediately began to pull inward the moment he passed through the entrance, filling the passage behind in rapid fashion until no sign remained at all of any opening. And as the dunes settled to normal again, the desert winds continued their shifting of the rest of the landscape. The snake and the sand maggot already joining countless other hapless denizens in the dusty, forgotten burial. The mountains lay far behind him, although how he had journeyed so far, Norik had only half recalled. At some point he had passed out from exhaustion, but evidently the suit had gone on, despite the fact that none of the effort had actually been his own. Every muscle in the veteran's body screamed, and every bone felt as it had broken. His lips were parched from the wind, while sweat covered much of his body. Norik yearned to peel off the armor and run free, but knew the hopelessness of that dream. The armor would do with him as it chose. And now, as he stood atop a ridge, staring at the first sight of civilization he had seen in many a day, an unsavory inn, a place that more befitted brigands and highwaymen rather than honest warriors such as himself. However, with darkness about to befall and Norik nearly done in, the suit seemed to finally register that it had to once more deal with the frailties of its human host. He marched without desiring to the building. Three glum horses stood tethered nearby, and at least one more sounded its displeasure from a wretched stable just beyond. Norik found himself wishing that he had his sword. The armor had not bothered to take that when it had walked out of the tomb with him. Just before he reached the doorway, the veteran's legs suddenly buckled under him. Norik quickly caught himself, realizing that Bartuk's damnable armor had granted him the dubious gift of entering on his own, likely in order to avoid notice of anything strange. Hunger and rest, more important to Norik at the moment than his own pride, the soldier pushed the door wide open. Grimy, suspicious faces looked up, the onlookers a mixture not only of the eastern races, but those on the other side of the Twin Seas as well. Mongrels, all four of them. Norik saw, and although he certainly held no man's background against them, this group did not look at all like men next to whom he desired to sit. Kind of place where you gotta watch your back even around the serving wench. Satan Trist would have jested. Trist, of course, would have sat with anyone who would have offered him a drink, but Satan was dead.
Shut the door. Go back out.
Snarled the one seated nearest. Norik obeyed, desiring no confrontations, forcing himself to act as if he had just ridden in. The weary fighter kept his head high as he walked smartly through the room. His body screamed as he moved, but not one there would know of it. Give these men even the slightest hint of weakness, and Norik suspected that they would make dire use of that fact. He approached what he assumed to be the innkeeper, a towering, heavy-set figure more frightful than his patrons, who stood behind a worn and scratched counter. A bush of dirty brown hair fought its way from under an old travel cap. Beady eyes stared from a round canine face. Norik had noted a peculiar odor in the room when he had first entered, and he knew it to originate from the man before him. He had thought that the armor would let him leave. Norik would have walked out regardless of his needs.
What?
The innkeeper finally muttered, scratching his extravagant belly. His shirt had been decorated in a variety of stains, and even a rip under the arm. I need food. That more than anything else.
I need good coin.
Coin. The desperate soldier fought back, growing frustration. Another item that had been left behind was the bloody corpse of his companions. His left hand suddenly shot forward, the gauntlet slapping down so hard on the counter that the innkeeper jumped. The men seated at the tables leapt to their feet, some reaching for weapons. The gauntlet pulled away, leaving behind an old but clearly gold coin. Recovering before the rest, Nork said, "And a room for that, too." You could feel every pair of eyes avidly staring at the coin. Once more, Nork silently cursed the damnable armor. If it could produce wealth from thin air, it could have at least produced something less conspicuous than gold. Again, he wished that he still carried his sword, or at least a good solid knife.
Got some stew in the pot back there. Got a room up second floor, first to the right.
I'll eat in there.
Suit yourself.
The innkeeper vanished in the back for a few moments, then returned with a stained bowl containing something that smelled even worse than he did. Nevertheless, Nora gratefully accepted it, his hunger so demanding now that if offered to him again, he would have eaten the goat the imps had mutilated. With the bowl in the nook of his arm, Nork followed the innkeeper's direction to the room. As he walked up the creaking wooden stairway, he heard low muttering down in the common area. His free hand tightened. The gold coin had burned itself into the minds of the men below. The room proved as dismissal as the veteran had expected. A dark, dusty closet with a window so grimy it gave no view of the outside. The bed looked ready to collapse, and what had once been white sheets now were permanently gray. A single oil lamp shed barely enough light to illuminate its immediate surroundings, much less the rest of the room. With no table or chair in the place, Norick gingerly sat on the bed and began spooning the contents of the bowl into his mouth. If anything, it tasted more vile than he could have imagined, but it seemed at least fresh enough not to kill him. The need to sleep grew more urgent as food filled his stomach. Norick had to struggle to remain awake long enough to finish, and the moment he had the bowl emptied, he dropped it gently on the floor and settled back. In the back of his mind, Norick continued to worry about those below him, but exhaustion soon overcame even that significant concern, and as he drifted off to sleep, Norick began to dream. He saw himself shouting commands at an infernal army of grotesque horrors his imagination could have never created on its own. Scaled, fiery, nightmarish abominations thirsting for blood. Blood Nork seemed all too willing to give them. Demons they were, but under his control, his complete control. They would raise cities from him, slaughter the inhabitants in his name. Even hell would respect the power of the warlord of blood. He, Barta. And at that thought, the soldier finally fought to escape the dream. He could never be Bartek, never demand such horror for the sake of his own desires. Never! Yet, such absolute power had its seductive side. Norick's internal battle with himself thankfully came to an abrupt halt as a noise suddenly awoke him. Eyes flashing open, he listened for more. What he had heard, father could not say. A small, somewhat insignificant sound, but one that had registered even in his subconscious. He heard it again, just barely audible through the closed door. The creak of someone slowly and seemed very cautiously ascending. There were other rooms, true, but the men below hardly struck Nork as so polite that they would tread so carefully in order not to disturb him. Had they tromped up the steps without concern, he would have thought nothing of it. However, such caution indicated to the soldier that perhaps they had something else in mind, something not at all to his liking. If a weary traveler had one gold coin, surely he had more. North's hand slipped to where the sword should have been. No hope there. That left him entirely dependent on the armor itself, not necessarily a path he could trust. Perhaps the suit would find one of the thieves more to its liking, opening the way for the soldier's easy slaughter. The creaking ceased. North pushed himself up as silently as he could. Two men with drawn knives broke through the dilapidated door, instantly diving towards the figure before them. From behind the pair came a third villain, this one wielding a curved short sword. Each of the attackers matched the rising fighter in height as well as in muscle, and they had the advantage of trapping him in a room with a window too small for North to fit through. He raised a fist ready to make them pay, and the fist suddenly held a long sable sword with wicked teeth set in the edge. Nork's hand came down with the blade, moving so swiftly that he and his first adversary could only gape. The blade ripped into the attacker, tearing flesh and sinew without effort. A gaping wound spread across the robber's entire chest as if by magic, blood spilling so fast from it that it took the victim a moment to realize that he had been slain. The first attacker finally slumped to the floor, even as his companions came to grips with this sudden dismaying turn of events. The one with the dagger sought to back away, but his partner pushed forward, daring to match blades. Nork might have warned the brigand of the foolishness of that, but by then they were already locked in combat. Once, twice, that proved all the effort the suit would allow its opponent. As the intruder brought his sword up for the third strike, Nork's gauntleted hand twisted sharply. The sable blade turned in a mad, zigzag fashion. His life fluid spilling from the horrendous slit running from his throat to his face. The second villain staggered. He dropped his sword as he desperately tried to prevent the inevitable. As if impatient to end matter, Nork's hand came up again. The head of his foe struck the floor, rolling to a corner and coming to a rest, all before the torso even began to tip over. Clearly aware of what chance he had, the third brigand already hurried to the doorway. Nork wanted to let him go, desiring no more bloodshed, but the suit chose otherwise, leaping over the two bodies and chasing after. At the bottom of the steps, the last of the trio struggled to get around the innkeeper, who appeared to be demanding to know why his friends had failed in their task. Both men looked up to see the crimson figure above them, the dark blade flaring. The innkeeper drew his prodigious long sword from his waist, a weapon so massive Nork momentarily feared that the suit had overestimated its invulnerability. The other man tried to continue his flight, but a fifth outlaw who suddenly appeared from behind the innkeeper pushed him back toward the fray. They expected to meet him on the stairs. They were sorely mistaken. Norg found himself leaping feet first toward the trio, their astonished faces no doubt matching his own. Two of them managed to back away just in time, but the lone survivor of the earlier debacle stood too horrified to move quickly. The sinister weapon made short work of him, the blade pushing through until it came at the back, then immediately retracting.
He's right. He's right.
Snarled the heavy-set innkeeper. The other swordmen obeyed. Nork knew exactly what the leader planned. Attack from opposite sides, keep the soldier distracted. One of them would surely land a blow, especially the innkeeper whose weapon had nearly twice the reach of the black one.
No.
Both men struck at once, one aiming for Nork's throat, the other for his legs, where the armor did not cover everywhere. These two had evidently battled side by side before, just as Nork had with Satan and Watson. Had it been his effort alone, the soldier knew that he would have perished there and then. Bartek's armor, however, fought with a speed and accuracy that nothing human could match. Not only did he force down the larger adversary's gargantuan blade, but it also managed to come up in time to deflect the second villain's strike. More amazing, it followed through with a savage thrust that sank into the throat of the latter man, and his companion fell. The innkeeper's iron reserve suddenly melted, still wielding his sword before he began to back toward the doorway. The suit pushed Nora forward, but did not harry the least of his foes. Flinging open the door, the innkeeper turned and fled into the night. Now, Nork expected Bartek's armor to pursue, but instead, the suit turned around and marched over to where one of the other bodies lay. As Nork knelt beside the corpse, the sable blade dissolved, leaving both hands free. To his horror, one gauntleted finger thrust into the mortal wound, pulling back only when the blood covered much of the upper portion of the digit. Moving to the wooden floor, the finger drew a pattern. His mouth suddenly blurted. The suit backed away, and as it did, a plume of rank greenish smoke arose from the bloody pattern. It quickly formed arms, legs, and tail and wings. A reptilian visage with too many eyes blinked in disdain, disdain that vanished when the demon saw what stood before it. The demon nodded. Without another word, the monstrous being headed toward the open door. In the distance, Nork heard the frantic beats of several fleeing horses. The reptilian horde picked up its pace, departing the inn. As it stepped outside, it spread its wings and took off, disappearing into the night. Nork did not have to guess its purpose. On the command of Bartek, it had gone hunting. The suit turned back toward the first corpse. Seemingly ignorant to his pleas, it forced him again to bend down near the body. A hand that had earlier touched the wound, but with one finger now planted all of them there, letting the blood stain the entire palm. Outside, a frantic human scream rose high, then cut off with harsh finality. In Norik's other hand, a new weapon appeared, this time a scarlet dagger with a double point at the end. A flapping wings warned him of the demon's return, but Norik could not twist his neck enough to see. He heard the heavy breathing of the creature and even the folding of its leathery wings as it settled down in the common room. The dagger shifted toward the corpse's throat. The veteran soldier shut his eyes, now praying for himself. Enough of his memories concerning his friend's deaths had come back to him to give him indication of what would happen next. Norik had no desire to face it, would have fled if he could. But he could do nothing now except try to preserve both his sanity and his soul. The dagger plunged into the throat of the brigand. General Augustus Malevolent arose from the sea of pillows, leaving Galena to whatever dreams the sorcerer of her ilk had. Without making a sound, he donned some clothes and stepped out of his tent. Two sentries snapped to attention, their eyes straight ahead. Malevolent gave them the slightest of nods, then moved on. A city of tents spread out to the west, the only home for the general's dedicated minions. Despite being a landless noble, he had managed to raise a fighting force virtually unequaled in the western kingdoms. For a price, he had served the causes of any ruler, garnered for himself the money he had needed for his future ambitions. Now, however, the point had come when he had sworn never to serve another, that someday he, Augustus Malevolent, would be master of more than this worthless patch of ground. The general turned his eyes to the south, where the vast desert of Aranok lay. For some time now, he had felt drawn in that direction, drawn to more than the fact that a tremendous prize, the rich, lush city of Lugolane, lay some distance within. Lugolane, despite its proximity to the desert, also bordered the Twin Seas. Because of that and the fertile strip of land on which it stood, the kingdom had prospered well. Several times would-be conquerors had thought to add its riches to their coffers, but each attempt had met with total disaster. Lugolane had not only proven to be well defended, but it appeared to have a bit of charmed existence. In fact, in Malevolent's mind, that charm bordered on outright sorcery. Something watched over the city, and that something was what most tantalized the commander now. Somehow it had some link to his desire to seize Bartek's custody and make it his own. Malevolent dreamed about it, found himself constantly turning his thoughts toward it. Soon, he whispered to himself, soon. And what will you do with that legacy? Emulate Bartek? Repeat his mistakes as well as his victories? He would not do that. For all the warlord's power, for all his command of Demon's Host, Bartek had one feeling that the general could not overlook. Bartek had not been a career soldier. The fabled warlord of blood had been first and foremost a sorcerer. Mages had their uses, especially Galena, but they were unstable and too focused on their arts. A true commander had to be able to keep their focus on the battlefield, on the logistics and sudden shifts that had been part of the reason why Augustus Malevolent had been unable to achieve any true skill with his own sorceress abilities. His military career had been his true passion, but with the armor, with the magic of Bartek, you could be more than him, the perfect fusion of soldier and sorcerer. You could be more than Bartek, even eclipsing him. Yes, yes. The general pictured his image forever engraved in the hearts and minds of those in the future. General Augustus Malevolent, Emperor of the world. And even demons would bow to you, call you master. Yes, with the armor his, the ability to summon demons would surely follow. The dreams he had since first wearing the helm all pointed to that. Reunite helm with suit, and the enchantments would give him the power. The suit. His brow furrowed. He needed the suit, and some fool had it. Malevolent would find him, find the Willis wrench, and peel off the armor piece by piece. Then he would reward the Cretan with the honor of being the first to die at the hands of the new warlord of blood. Yes, the general would make the fool's death a memorable one. Augustus Malevolent walked on, dreaming of his glory, dreaming of what he would do with the dark powers he would soon wield. Yet, while he walked and dreamt, he still paid meticulous attention to his encampment, for a good leader always watched to make certain that slovenliness did not spread among his forces. Empires were won and lost because of overlooking such seemingly minor things. Yet, while Malevolent noted the care with which his loyal warriors performed their tasks, he failed to notice a shadow not caused by the flickering torches. He also failed to notice that this self same shadow had stood behind him moments prior. whispering what the general had believed been his own thoughts, his own questions, his own dreams. The shadow of the demon Zazak shifted toward Galena's tent. His work this night, more than to his satisfaction. This human presented some interesting possibilities, one that he would explore. It had occurred to him that long ago that the armor of Bartek would never accept an actual demon as its master. For while the warlord had come to believe in the ways of hell, he had also carried a basic distrust of anyone but himself. No, if the spirit of Bartok remained even in part in the ancient armor, it would demand a more susceptible human host. However fragile and temporary as their bodies might be, the general desire to play warlord, that suited Zazek's well. The witch had her uses, but a successor to the bloody Bartok, Zazek's Lord Belial, would reward his humble servant well for such a find. Not only had the civil war and hell against Azmodan not gone well of late, but troublesome rumors had reached even there that the primeval Diablo had made his good escape from his mortal prison. If so, he would seek to free his brothers Baal and Mephisto from theirs as well, at which point they would then attempt to regain their thrones from Azmodan and Belial. The three would not deal well with demons who had so loyally served their rebellious lieutenants. If Belial fell, so too would Zazax.
What have you been doing?
The shadow paused just within the entrance of the sorcerer's abode. This one has many tasks and cannot be at your beck and call, human Galena. He made a cackling sound, much like a sand maggot might have done just before crushing its prey in its mandibles. Besides, you slept.
Not deep enough to sense your magic in the air. You promised you wouldn't cast any spells around here. Augustus has some skill. You might notice and wonder what it means.
There is no danger of that. This one promises.
I ask again, demon. What were you doing?
Making a little study of the helmet. Zazax lied, shifting to another part of the tent. Searching for a fool who knows not what he wears. Her anger turned to interest.
And did you find out where he is? If I could tell him a little bit more.
The demon chuckled, a scratchy sound like furious bees trapped in a jug. Why, when we agree that the armor will never be his?
Because he still has the helmet, you fool. And until we find the armor, we still need Augustus because his connection to the helmet.
True, mused the demon. His ties to it run deep. This one would say, blood deep. Her chin went up as she flung her hair back. Signs that Zazax had long ago learned meant that the human had grown angry.
And what does that mean?
The shadow did not waver. This one only meant to jest with that sorceress. Only a jest. We speak of things concerning Bartok, do we not?
A demon with a sense of humor?
Galena looked not at all amused.
Very well. I'll leave the jesting to you. You leave Augustus to me.
This one would not seek to take your place in the general's bed. The sorceress gave the shadow a withering glance, then left the tent. Sussex knew she would hunt down Malevolent, begin reinforcing her hold on him. The demon respected her abilities in this manner, even if he felt confident that, in his struggle between Galena and himself, the witch woman would surely lose. After all, she was mortal, not one of the foul angels. Had she been such, Sussex might have been more concerned. Angels were conniving, working behind the scenes, playing tricks instead of confronting their foes directly. The shadow of the demon pulled back, secreting himself in the darkest corner. No angels had interfered so far, so Zazek intended to remain wary. If one showed itself, he would take it in his claws and slowly pluck its limbs from it one at a time, all the while listening to the sweet songs of its scream. "Come to me if you dare, angels," he whispered to the darkness. "This one will greet you with open arms and teeth and claws." The dim flame from the single oil lamp suddenly flared, briefly illuminating Glena's tent far more than normal. In that sudden light, the shadow hissed and cringed. The outline of a massive emerald and crimson insect briefly flashed into sight, then quickly faded again as the flame dimmed. Zazax chittered furiously, grateful that Galena had not witnessed his reaction. Oil lamps often flared. He had only been taken by surprise by a mundane act of nature. Nonetheless, the shadow of the demon pressed deeper into the comforting recesses of the tent. There he could safely plot. There he could safely use his power to seek out the human wearing Vortex armor. There he could watch better for cowardly angels.